Okay, is it recording? Yep, okay. Hi. Decided to do a vlog because that's what most people have voted for when I asked whether I should do a vlog or blog entry on my work experience at apple orchards in Hastings. It feels a bit weird looking at a camera and knowing that I'm gonna edit it later. But anyway, I'll start with how I ended up with this job. Honestly, I had zero interest in apples prior to starting this job. I took it simply because I needed the money. There's this seasonal calendar that backpackers usually refer to know that which area and which month will be the season for certain types of crops or fruits and vegetables. So I knew that summer was coming, so there was going to be work in Napier and Hastings, so that's how I went down there. To cut a long story short, I was staying in another hostel and had quite a bad experience there. The room was very grimy and it was a converted children's room that I was sleeping in. There were strange men showing up at weird hours, and the beds were disgusting. They still smelled like sweat of other people. So after 2 nights there, I couldn't take it anymore. So I just drove down to Hastings to visit this other hostel that I had planned on staying on at first, but the hostel manager didn't respond to my calls. Once I moved in, I really needed money. I could have transferred money from back home, but I didn't want to do that. I think it was for about a week before she told me that there's this new apple orchard job that's coming up and whether I wanted to do it. Money was the necessity, so I just took on this job. This kind of arrangement usually means that you have to stay on at the hostel. You can't flake on them and leave because they have an agreement with the company. I mean, that wasn't an issue for me because the second hostel that I stayed in was clean, was nice, and everyone there ended up being super nice, so it wasn't an issue at all. Next part, who I worked with. Primarily, I worked with backpackers from the same hostel, so at peak, there was 10 of us from the same hostel, people from Germany, France, South Korea, Sweden, Japan. The group sort of fluctuated and changed over time. People were leaving and then they were replaced with new people. And then the other second group was what the Kiwis actually called casual loyals. So they're actually locals, but they work during, the certain peak seasons. And they have been consistently coming back every year during the same period of time in the year to work at the job. And then we had our managers who were locals, a mix of Maori and I don't know, white locals. I don't know if that's the politically correct term to use. Lastly, there were these two Japanese guys as well who got the job through their own arrangement. Now, moving on to what the job was actually like. We work 10 hours a day from Mondays to Fridays, and then on Saturdays there's an optional half day that you could work. So in total, that's 54 hours a week maximum that you can work. Throughout the day, we will get 3 breaks a day. Call them smokos. It's a combination of the word having a smoke and coffee. Smoko. 3 breaks a day, one in the morning, I think it was 10:30, and then the second one at 1 o'clock, and then the last one at 3:30 or something like that. And we are paid for all the breaks except for one. Okay, actual job scope. I remember I asked my friend Minako, Japanese girl, at the beginning because they had been working for about a week or two longer than I have. They started first. And I asked her whether the job was difficult and what it entailed, and she said no, it's very easy. We just tie cables every day. And then I think to my mind at the time was kind of what do you mean just tie cables every day? I couldn't comprehend it. Stepping back a bit to explain what we were doing, we were part of the orchard development team. And what that entailed was basically taking care of the young trees. So basically the orchards that still were in development, they have not maybe borne fruit yet, because these trees, they actually take quite a number of years from when you first plant them before they actually bear fruit that can be sold. So throughout this time, you need to consistently be taking care of the trees in a certain way so that they grow up in a certain way that makes it better for harvesting.
Good night. Good night, dear.
The reason why we were tying cables every day was because we were working in a 2D orchard. So there's a difference between a 2D orchard and a 3D orchard. The objective of what we're trying to do with like the 2D orchard is to get the trees to grow up straight. Sometimes, like depending on where the sun is and them trying to get more sunlight, the tree will grow like slanted, or sometimes it's blown by the wind and then it will just kind of like snap off and bend and things like that. So our objective, the objective of the work that we were doing, was to make sure that the trees could grow up straight, and we had to have the branches sort of splayed out this way along wires that were running across the different rows. And that's because that will affect the way that it's harvested, and they were trying to harvest the fruit in a certain way. We kind of like rotated to different orchards. Sometimes we will like finish up one, and then after that, by the time we had gone through a few, the first one had grown quite a bit already, and we will go back there and work on it. 90% of the time that we were working was spent on tying cables, and there were two types of cables that we worked with. Green ties and tuit ties. So green ties, these are like sort of like elastic, a little bit tougher like cables that we use for sort of the what they call the lead branch, which is what will eventually become the trunk of the tree. What we basically do is to tie the lead branch to the wire so that it's growing up straight, and if it's bent a bit, we sort of coax it to the center and then tie it to the wire. Yeah, that's basically it. There's a very specific way to tie it that we had to learn on our first day. I'm not gonna say it's like the most difficult thing, but it did take a while to like get used to. And I remember the first like week or two, my fingers were really like the skin was like getting very dry and falling off and everything, and my fingers actually hurt from all the tying, like they were sore. But I mean, yeah, like I said, you get used to it. Tuit ties. Okay, so tuit ties are these like softer bands made out of cloth. I guess kind of similar to a girl's hairband. And these were used to tie the branches that were splaying out. There were certain conditions they had to meet, like they had to be 30 cm long. They had to be close to the wire, not past a certain distance. And yeah, we would basically pick that branch and bend it down and tie it to the wire so that it grows out straight. Sometimes the lead branch is still very weak, perhaps it had broken off already, or we would actually get these wooden bamboo sticks that we would stick into the ground or tie to the wires, and then we would actually adhere the lead branch to the stick so that then it's able to grow up straight over a period of time. There were these spray guards that protect the root area with pesticides, but the problem is that there will be weeds like growing in the area also. This is an apple tree, and I need to pull out this humongous weed. Not this one. It's in the spray guard. So I cannot even pull it out. This is just like so humongous. It's this thing. This is the apple tree trunk. This is the weed. Getting this bitch out. Hope I don't like destroy the entire tree. Oops. Okay. Okay, well, now I have to take it out. Well, I got it out. I think I might have destroyed the root in the process though. I can't really see, but yeah, I broke one of the roots. We're really in love. At the same time, there were flowers growing on the plants, which if left untended, they would become what you call applets. So applets are just a small form of apples before they grow and become like big and actual apples. What we'll actually have to do is to pull them out, because if left untended, they would just keep growing and actually takes away the energy that could be allocated to the rest of the plant to grow. Once we got used to it, I found that you could actually finish it really quickly. There were times where you're really like in the zone, you can speed down each line like super fast, and sometimes it becomes like a little bit of a competition. There was this one Saturday in particular, I remember very clearly. It's the Saturday after Valentine's Day. I was a bit hungover because I drank a little like the night before, so the next day I was sort of like zoned out, but strangely that actually enabled me to work faster. So I was like moving super fast. It's just could be a bit tiring sometimes. As the tree grows, it's not just like a single branch that grows out very nicely for you to tie onto a cable on each side, which is why we worked alongside a pruning team, and that's where a lot of the casual loyals were working at. And the two Japanese guys, they were doing that task as well. Although sometimes, I guess, if we were a bit behind, once they were done, they would come and help us. Usually what they would do is they would cut off the branches that were deemed like, I guess, not quite in the right position or too thin or weak. They will cut those off so that it leaves the rest of us on the development team to just really work on the ones that could be tied down to the wires. But that being said, towards the end of my 2 months there, we did do, I think, about a week or a week and a half of pruning. So it was very simple. They gave us what they called secateurs. Never encountered that word before. I always just referred to it as shears, but afterwards I found out that shears are actually, meant for cutting the wool off of sheep. We didn't do what the pruning team had been doing all this time. What we actually did was something called hedge trimming. So we went to an orchard where everything was already developed. So the trees there, they were planted, I think, at least 5 years ago, and they were ready to bear fruit already. And if I'm not wrong, they were already harvesting fruit from that orchard. And what was really cool that I found out was that this orchard is actually the biggest 2D orchard in the world. The first day we went there, even though it was a 30-minute drive from our hostel, so we had to leave earlier, we were just greeted with this beautiful sunset, and we were just in the middle of nowhere and this vastness. It was just really beautiful. And even after we got to the meeting point, so driving to the spot where we were gonna work actually took us 5 minutes. I don't know, I just love being in vast places of nature, and maybe that's why I always felt quite pent up in Singapore, because that's not really something that we get. Even the nature that we do have back home is very manicured, which I am not saying is a completely bad thing, but it's just that there is something about that kind of vastness that just makes me feel more connected to the world, I guess. Anyway, so back to hedge trimming. All these trees, they were actually ready to be harvested already, and there was already quite a lot of fruit coming out. But the thing was just that they needed the apples to grow a little bit more, and by that time a lot of leaves have grown out that were covering the fruit, and apples need both I can't remember this, I wrote this down somewhere, but I wasn't able to check with my manager. But if I remember correctly, I think the cold helps them grow in size, and sunlight helps it grow in color, becomes more red. Don't quote me on this, I could be wrong. So all these leaves were actually blocking the fruit that had already come out, and the managers wanted for the fruit to receive a bit more sunlight before they harvested them. So we did what was called hedge trimming, which is basically in a particular, a window of the wires. We will cut the leaves such that they were flat and thin enough so that sunlight could come in and actually help the fruits grow. And this was super insane. We had to move so quickly, and my hands were quite sore from holding the secateurs and just non-stop snipping. So lastly, I guess some of the perks and takeaways from this job. Actually, I was talking to someone about this, and they said this job must be really boring. Why do you like it? Because you're just doing the same thing over and over again. But actually what I found was that I really liked that I was doing the same thing over and over again. I won't deny that there were times that I got bored. There were times where I would keep checking my watch and just wondering when work would end, when the next break would be, because I was just so sick of tying the cable. It felt like running actually. At least in the past, I used to find running very, very boring because, to me it's you are panting really hard, you're running and moving your legs and just doing the same thing over and over again. After this job, I kind of see the benefit of doing something over and over again. I found that usually sometimes I would have emotional issues that I was working through, and I would just go to work. Somehow you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and you let your mind just drift or work itself out, and the problem just gets solved. I've had so many moments where I would have this sudden revelation in the orchard about a problem or a situation that I had been stuck on or thinking about for a long time. And it was actually really amazing. We had really, really nice managers. There were 4 of them, but primarily we worked with 3. One of the Saturdays when we showed up to work, for those of us who did, our manager actually took us to one of the orchards where fruit was already ready to be harvested, and he just let us pick as many apples as we wanted, and they were just super nice. What was really motivating about that trip to the orchard is not just because they let us pick fruit, although that was great, but it was more of because we were tying cables every day, we were working with young trees. If you're not going to be in agriculture, you won't see the impact of the work that you're doing. Perhaps what he was trying to do was to motivate us, to show us that, you may think that what you're doing is insignificant, it's boring, it's just repetitive, doing the same thing over and over again. But 2 years down, this is going to be the fruit of your work, literally. At the hostel, obviously there were a lot of other backpackers staying there as well, and not all of us were at the same jobs. A huge number of them were working in pack houses, and there were day shifts and night shifts. So night shift would be, I think, 4 to 2 a.m, something like that, 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. And I felt that we had a lot more freedom than those working in the pack houses. At the peak, I think for pack house, you could work up to 60 hours, which is great if you are trying to save up money. But some of the downsides of working in a pack house is that you can't listen to music because you're not allowed to wear earphones when you're working. And the pack house is really loud from the machines running, and I guess to keep everyone's spirits up, what I heard is that they will actually blast like pop music or even like electronic music. Because of that, it's so loud you can't really like talk to other people. And most of my friends that were in the pack houses, what they did was they will usually be stationed at the same place, and apples will come down and they would have to sort the apples. And so for your 10 or 12 hour shift, you are just standing there doing the same thing over and over again. You can't talk to anyone. I felt that we were actually like really, really lucky because, our managers didn't stop us from listening to music. You listen to music, you can talk to other people in the row next to yours, as long as it didn't affect your pace too much. When it got hot, we could actually slow down. Within reason, we could take breaks to go and get water. I think best of all is that we were outdoors, we could move around rather than freezing yourself in the same position in a pack house, just doing the same thing over and over again. Although our managers had targets to hit, and if you were too slow, they will kind of poke you and rush you a little bit. But generally, if they see that you are working hard and you are really putting in an effort to be consistent with your work, they actually did not rush us. So that was really nice. There were no like sort of targets that we had to hit by the end of the day. Whereas for some of the other people that I knew who were doing picking jobs, so they were maybe at a berry farm picking strawberries or blueberries, if you pick past a certain amount, you get paid more based on weight. But it is actually quite difficult to pick past a certain weight for certain months. There'll be months where there'll be lots of fruit and it will be super easy to go past the minimum wage. But a lot of the time, you will not be able to even hit the amount that you need to get minimum wage. The company will top you up to minimum wage because legally they're abided to pay minimum wage to you. For certain companies, if you've been working there for a while and you're still too slow, and if you are literally not pulling your weight, then they will actually let you go after a while. The downside of this job, I guess, is that when it rains or if the weather is bad, like if it's too hot, we were walking through summer, so there were days that it was too hot, work will get called off. So too hot being like over 35 degrees. So because you are paid by the hour, basically you paid by how much you work. And so if you don't work, then it just means you earn less. I guess the toughest part about this job actually is the days when it was very hot, because when we were working, it was in the summer. There were days when, it's not quite 35 degrees yet and we still had to push through. we would be carrying ladders down each row because the trees would grow quite tall, and there were certain parts on the top that you can't reach just by standing. And yeah, you would have to climb up the ladder and tie and then come down, bring the ladder somewhere else. Yeah, it's like, again, it's not like insanely difficult, but it's just that it's hot and you're out there. It was quite tiring in the first week in terms of the hours. It felt like really long, and I physically was not used to it. But after the first week, it was fine. I know that some of my friends really struggled, especially those from Ireland and UK. But everyone else, I think, even if you're tired, they tended to get used to it after a week or two. I feel really blessed to have had that experience working at that orchard. Aside from how beautiful it was, how big the space was, and how special it was to have the chance to be in a place where it's the biggest 2D orchard in the world. I had the opportunity to connect with someone that I grew to really respect, which is one of the Japanese guys, the one that stayed behind. He's gonna continue working in agriculture, and hearing his reasons for why was something that really moved me. That's pretty much it for my work experience. I had a really great time, and it's crazy because I didn't expect myself to really enjoy it. I thought I would love this sort of work experience only if it was a crop that I was actually interested in. But for me, it was a really, really special experience because it gave me not just a greater appreciation and curiosity for agriculture, but it was just this backdrop for a lot of emotional growth. So that's it. I don't know if anyone has any more questions, but you can DM me or leave a comment, I guess. Okay. Yeah, the sun is really shining on my face. Okay, bye.